Hello and welcome to Frost Over the World. Later in the programme, rock legend Mark Knopfler, The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, billionaire philanthropist Mo Ibrahim. Looking ahead to Copenhagen, what's going to happen there later in the month. And the latest from Iran's opposition, 5 months on from that so disputed election. But first, the Commonwealth. Leaders of the 53 countries in the Commonwealth are meeting in Trinidad and Tobago this weekend, lucky so-and-sos, marking the organisation's 60th anniversary. They'll be talking about issues ranging from Fiji and Zimbabwe to climate change. And I'm joined now from Trinidad by John Key, the Prime Minister of New Zealand. Let me start with a question that's in the headlines today. With all of your financial experience in your career and so on, would you expect the events in Dubai to have a ripple effect as far away as New Zealand?
Well, that would be my expectation, David. I mean, we live in a world now that's globally interconnected. Not just from information, but obviously capital flows and trade flows. So inevitably, when you see a fairly significant situation as you're seeing emerging in Dubai, that is going to have an impact around the world's stock markets, primarily in relation to confidence, I would have thought. But yeah, there'll be no doubt a package put together to give support, and there's an enormous amount of wealth sitting there in the Emirates in the Middle East. So how this plays out, I'm not quite sure. I mean, it's been no secret actually for quite some time that Dubai has amassed enormous debts.
Yes, yes, indeed. The other story that was in the papers here was that there may be consideration at this CHOGM for the possibility of Zimbabwe being invited back into the Commonwealth. Would you be in favour of that?
I think there's sort of mixed views on that. From New Zealand's perspective, we're not totally opposed, but we would rather see more progress being made from the new government, if you like. There's some concerns in recent weeks about the stability of that regime and ultimately how much progress Morgan Tsvangirai is actually making. So, I mean, in principle, a move back to the Commonwealth from Zimbabwe is always possible, but I think it would take a little bit more action and demonstrable success before we would really want to entertain that. Right,
I see, yes, absolutely. And the other thing that came up was that Sri Lanka are allegedly agitating for the next CHOGM to be held in Sri Lanka, and I think Gordon Brown's initial reaction was not wildly enthusiastic. Is it premature, do you think?
Yeah, I think we'd share the views of Gordon Brown. There is obviously an enormous number of issues being tackled in Sri Lanka, and I would have thought it would be premature to hold CHOGM there in 2011. I know there are a number of other countries putting up their hand to host the event. And I'm sure one day it'll be a wonderful opportunity to host a CHOGM in Sri Lanka, but to us 2011 looks a little early. There are an enormous number of risks there, and I'm not sure how successful the event would be so early on in the piece.
And of course Fiji, a country very close to you, of course. Fiji is going to be a big issue, isn't it? Suspended from the Commonwealth. They say they're making progress towards democracy and elections in 2014, by 2014 and so on. What do you think the Commonwealth will have to say about the situation in Fiji, and what do you have to say about it indeed?
Well, I think broadly there's a united view that Fiji should stay suspended from the Commonwealth. There'll be one or two people agitating for Fiji to be allowed to attend the Commonwealth Games. New Zealand wouldn't support that. It would be inconsistent with the previous position adopted by the Commonwealth when we've had those sort of situations in the past. And from New Zealand's point of view, we think it would send completely the wrong message to the Bainimarama administration. I mean, we see very little progress really being made there. In recent times, you'll probably be aware the third senior diplomat from the New Zealand embassy has been sent home and declared persona non grata by the administration. At the same time, the Australian High Commissioner was expelled as well. And frankly, while in theory Frank Bainimarama is saying that he has a roadmap for democracy and that he's going to hold elections in 2014, there's absolutely no engagement being undertaken with local stakeholders, with the other political parties, and very little signs of progress. So from our point of view, we want to see democracy restored. New Zealand's prepared to do whatever that takes, including financial support and support with human capital. We think it's extremely important that the coup culture, which has dominated Fiji for 20 years, is relegated to history, and that a fresh start can be made in Fiji. But that won't happen unless all of the political players are part of this constitutional electoral reform.
And we started by talking about finance and Dubai and so on. What about among the 53 nations represented at CHOGM and so on? Among the poorer nations, has this credit crunch had a really serious effect? And is there anything the Commonwealth can do to help the countries that are suffering the most?
Well, unquestionably it will have had an effect. It's had an effect on every economy around the world. I mean, some of the smaller, less developed economies are less integrated into the world economy, so in that sense they're spared the wild fluctuations. But nevertheless, the impact will be felt as donor countries struggle to increase their contributions or to keep up with their contributions. It's harder to get progress in a number of areas as people battle from a jobs perspective. We're seeing, for instance, very delayed progress on trade integration around the world, with Doha being stalled and the like. So it does have an impact on every economy, and I think you're really discussing though that global economic recession and now what happens next as we come out of the recovery phase is something that's likely to be debated. It certainly has been at APEC and the East Asian Summit and the United Nations General Assembly, all of three which I attended.
And in fact, in terms of the future and so on, the traditional question, John, I mean, do you think it is inevitable, as Helen Clark used to say, that one day New Zealand will be a republic?
Yeah, I guess it's ultimately going to be on the agenda. I certainly don't think it'll happen in my time in office. New Zealand has a very strong link to Britain and to the Commonwealth and to the monarchy. And while I think there are certain catalysts that could precipitate that event, and it's more likely in my view that Australia, for instance, will become a republic before New Zealand, I'm not sure it's going to happen in the short term. There's a very deep link between Maori, our Indigenous people, and the Crown and the United Kingdom and the Queen. And until at least all of those historical treaty settlements are resolved, which we're working quite hard to achieve, I think it's very unlikely that step would be taken. So, I mean, in New Zealand, the Queen's very loved, and as you're probably aware, I brought back titular honours when I became Prime Minister, and that's been something greeted with about an 80% approval rate. So that's pretty good on any policy, I would have thought.
And looking ahead to vital issues in 2011, you'll be hosting the Rugby World Cup. Are you predicting victory?
Oh, absolutely. Those mighty All Blacks who have been on display in the United Kingdom in the last few weeks are no doubt deeply focused on the importance of such a large event. And of course, last time we won, 1987, when New Zealand hosted the Rugby World Cup. So we're confident. I think it's fair to say the boys haven't been in totally sparkling form, but I have no doubt that come the big event in New Zealand with 4.4 million Kiwis behind them, they'll lift up the Webb Ellis Trophy and bring it home for New Zealand.
You really do fantastically well in sport, don't you? With, as you say, 4 million Kiwis and so on and so forth. But in cricket, and look at the population of England or whatever, and New Zealand do well. They do stunningly well in rugby. You're a pretty successful sporting nation, aren't you?
Yeah, we like to think so, although as has been witnessed overnight, the first innings from the Black Caps is often better than the second innings when it comes to cricket. But yeah, look, we're a very sporting nation, we're an outdoor nation, and rugby is still very much a religion in New Zealand. We've just, as you may be aware, qualified for the World FIFA Football Champs in South Africa next year, so we hadn't had made that feat for 20 odd years, so there was an ecstatic reception from the New Zealand public, and yeah, another example of us doing well. We've got the World Rowing Champs in New Zealand in 2010, another area where New Zealand's done well. So we are very much a sporting nation. I think we punch above our weight there.
I think you do indeed. I'm sure it's all. The credit goes above all, of course, to the government, of course. Thank you very much.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much for being with us, John. It's been a pleasure. Look forward to seeing you in London.
Thank you very much. Likewise.
And from New Zealand, next to post-election Iran, after this short break.